Welcome to Exempt Human Subjects Research. This presentation is approved by the University of Buffalo's Institutional Review Board, better known as the IRB. I am Zachary Chakan. I'm an IRB administrator who will be presenting this slideshow. This presentation is part of the University of Buffalo's Clinical and Translational Science Institute's educational series. Today's topics include what is the definition of human subjects research, and some examples of studies or submissions that would qualify as not human research, some examples of what is exempt human subjects research and different categories that exempt studies would fall under, and how to proceed with exempt human subjects research. So what is human subjects research? The definition of a human subject, per the government regulations, is an individual about whom an investigator conducting research obtains information or biospecimens through intervention or interaction with the individual and uses, studies, or analyzes the information or biospecimens, or obtains, uses, studies, analyzes, or generates identifiable private information or identifiable biospecimens. Research is defined as a systematic investigation, including research development, testing, and evaluation, designed to develop or contribute to generalizable knowledge. The generalizable knowledge is usually a key component in determining whether or not a study meets human subjects criteria for IRB submissions. The National Institutes of Health has a very similar definition to the Department of Health and Human Services, which is research involving a living individual about whom data or biospecimens are obtained, used, studied, or analyzed through interaction or intervention, or research in which identifiable private information is used, studied, analyzed, or generated. Pretty much the same words as the HHS definition, except reworded in a different way. Some examples of studies that are not human subjects research include marketing research, journalism or oral history projects, internal quality assurance or quality improvement projects, which are probably the most common types of not human subjects research that we see at the university, teacher and student evaluations, case reports that are a retrospective analysis of 1, 2, or 3 clinical cases, de-identified or anonymous secondary data from a source that originally collected the data for a different purpose, or information related to deceased individuals. Please note that case reports of over 3 clinical cases are considered to be human subjects research by the UB-IRB. We do have guidance available about case reports specifically located in our CLIC library. The IRB uses the HRP 310 Human Research Determination Worksheet to make the final decision about whether a study qualifies as human subjects research or not. In the case of this worksheet, if we are not able to complete all of the required elements, then the study would meet not human subjects research criteria, and you would receive a not human subjects research approval letter from the IRB in CLIC. The link in the bullet point below includes a human subjects decision chart. Chart 1 references whether an activity is human subjects research as defined by the government regulations 45 CFR 46. IRB review and approval are not required for not human subjects research. However, the IRB does strongly recommend that all research proposals be submitted in CLIC for an official determination. This way, it would prevent you from conducting human subjects research without approval. The most likely scenario where this could happen is for quality assurance or quality improvement type studies, which often balance the line between human research and non-human research. As noted in the prior slide, The above recommendation does not apply to case reports of 3 individuals or less. If you think that your study does not meet human subjects research criteria, the IRB recommends that you add a comment in your click submission and ask for a non-human subjects research determination and state your reasons why you believe that that is the case. The IRB will then use the HRP 310 Human Subjects Worksheet in order to help make a determination whether it qualifies for this category or not. If you are not collecting any identifiable data as part of your study, and this may end up being a reason why your study does not qualify for human research, the IRB also recommends that you submit an HRP 613 Certificate of De-Identification document as part of your submission. This is available in the CLIC library as well. This helps certify that the investigator, to the best of your knowledge, is not collecting any data that has any identifiers as part of it. So how does exempt research differ from non-human research? Exempt research also poses no greater than minimal risk to participants. And exempt research does meet exempt guidelines described in the slides coming up in this presentation. However, exempt research does qualify as human research, so it is not exempt from that category, but it is exempt from certain government regulations. For the IRB, how is exempt research handled differently than non-exempt research? The initial IRB review process is a little different, and also exempt research is exempt from further continuing review from the IRB. This means that you will not have to submit a continuing review every year as you would for expedited research or for greater than minimal risk research. This chart shows how exempt human subjects research meets the definition for human subjects research and must meet the criteria for one of the 8 exempt categories shown below in the green boxes. Some of these exempt categories are either rarely or never used here at the university, so we will not talk about those too much. However, the upcoming slides will go into greater detail on the first 4 exempt categories to try to describe those procedures a little bit better for investigators. Some of these details include that exempt research cannot involve prisoners unless the research includes a broader population that happens to include prisoners. And a few of these exempt categories cannot involve children as participants. The first exempt research category is exempt category 1, research conducted in an educational setting using normal educational practices. Normal educational practices can certainly mean different things to different people, and it is a gray area that the IRB has to consider whenever reviewing this type of research. The educational practice has to be generally or normally accepted for that setting or age, and it cannot include brand new interventions or educational practices that have not been researched before. The research cannot include any other procedures such as clinical data collection or biospecimen collection. Randomization cannot occur in these types of studies. And it is very important that the research not likely to adversely impact students' opportunity to learn or the assessment of educators. This exempt research category can apply to children, but it can also apply in college or other adult educational settings or in-service training such as research with employees. Exempt Category 2 research is research that uses educational tests, surveys or questionnaires, interviews, or observations of public behavior where one of the following criteria are met. The data collected cannot readily identify the subject, whether that is through identifiable data as part of the data set, or through a code number, or any disclosure of the data outside of the research would not place a subject at any type of risk, especially criminal, employability risk, reputational risk, educational advancement, and the like, or information is recorded with identifiers, but the IRB conducts what is called a limited IRB review on the study's confidentiality procedures. Focus groups can also be included in exempt category 2 research, even though they aren't mentioned in the previous slide. For studies that are enrolling children and engaging in the study activities described in this category cannot be determined as exempt typically. There are a few exceptions that involve educational tests or observations of public behavior that can only include children when investigators do not participate in the activities being observed, although this is quite rare at the university. Video or audio recording is permitted in exempt level research, so this will not automatically bump your study up to expedited if you want to audio or video record an interview or a focus group. If the IRB has to conduct a limited IRB review, as mentioned in the previous slide, the IRB uses the HRP 319 Limited IRB Review Worksheet that is available in the Click library. Exempt Category 3 research is research that involve benign behavioral interventions in adults only who prospectively agree to the research and meet one of the following criteria, which are the same as exempt criteria 2. The data recorded cannot readily identify the subject through a code number or through direct identifiers, or if any disclosure of the responses outside of the research could not reasonably place the subject at risk, as stated before in the previous slide, or if a limited IRB review is conducted with the study's confidentiality and privacy procedures. Exempt Category 3 research may not include children under any circumstances or involve any medical interventions, only benign behavioral interventions. But what is a benign behavioral intervention? It's not really a commonly used term. A benign behavioral intervention, as defined by the regulations, is an intervention that's brief in duration, although how brief isn't really defined either, but typically an intervention that takes days or weeks to conduct would not be included in this research category. The benign behavioral intervention must be painless and harmless, it must not be physically invasive, and it must not be likely to have a significant long-term impact on the subjects or be offensive or embarrassing to the subjects. Some examples of a benign behavioral intervention could be where a participant is asked to read an article about a particular situation and then be presented with multiple images and then asked about what they think about those images based off of the article that they read. Another example could be the common delay discounting task, where participants are presented with earning 50 cents now or $2 in 5 days if they wait for that amount of time. Even maldeception is not allowed in exempt category 3 research unless the participant prospectively agrees to being deceived during the consent process. This would mean that the consent would have to include some type of language that would say that the participant will not know all of the details about the study in order to hide the true purpose, to not make their behavior be different during the research study. Similar to exempt category 2, the HRP 319 limited review worksheet is used for exempt category 3 in cases where it is necessary. Exempt category 4 is secondary research, where research is being conducted on identifiable data or biospecimens if that information is publicly available, or conducting secondary research on data where the subjects cannot be re-identified. Sometimes the IRB could ask investigators to include in the protocol whether or not they have the ability to re-identify subjects or recontact subjects, and to put information in their HRP 503 protocol that they will not do so. This exempt category, however, cannot be used for chart review studies that are subject to HIPAA requirements and where identifiable information is being collected and recorded. A study can still meet this exempt 4 criteria at University of Buffalo if HIPAA is not involved or if identifiers are not recorded as part of the research. Exempt Category 5 and Exempt Category 6 are two exempt research categories that are very infrequently used at UB. Exempt 5 is research and demonstration projects which are conducted or supported by a federal department or agency, and Exempt Category 6 are taste and food quality evaluations. If you see any information about Exempt Category 7 or Exempt Category 8, please know that these exempt categories are not used at University of Buffalo. They are also not commonly used throughout the country either, as these were exempt categories that were implemented as part of the 2018 Common Rule change. Both of these categories include broad consent, which is not being implemented at this university. The link in this slide shows a helpful decision chart created by HHS about exempt research. The IRB will make the final determination about whether your study meets exempt criteria by using the HRP 312 exempt worksheet. This worksheet is available in the Click Library under the Worksheets tab. It is important to know that all research activities in a study must fall under an exempt category for the study to receive an exempt determination. For example, if your study procedures are mostly exempt, but there is one research procedure that would bump your study up to an expedited category, then we cannot review your study as exempt. You will not need to submit modifications to your exempt study unless you feel that the modification may change your study from an exempt level to an expedited level, or if it might move the study from exempt research to be not human research. The IRB does recommend that if you believe your new study may qualify for an exempt category, to please add a comment and click that states you are seeking an exempt determination. This is similar to the process for not human research as described earlier, and this will help the reviewer to focus in on what might make your study exempt as part of the review process. In exempt studies, the IRB sometimes sees situations where there are interactions with participants as part of this research, but there is no consent taking place. If your study has interactions with participants, there must be some type of consent process for exempt research. The consent process must disclose the following details: that the study activities actually involve research, what procedures will be performed as part of the research, that participation is voluntary, and the name and contact information must be included for the principal investigator. There also must be adequate provisions to maintain the participant's privacy during the consent process of exempt research. Now, an information sheet can be used for the consent process for exempt research. You do not need to use the HRP 502 consent template that is required for expedited and greater than minimal risk level research. However, if you submit an information sheet that includes the details as shown in this slide, but the study does not qualify for an exemption after IRB review, you will be asked to submit an HRP 502 consent template. You can still use an HRP 502 consent template for exempt research if you would like, because it will include all of the requirements for exempt research. Some additional resources for exempt research include the Human Subject Regulations decision charts as shown in a previous slide, and as mentioned before as well, the UB IRB Policies and Procedures Toolkit HRP 312 exempt worksheet. That is available again in the Click Library. Thank you to everyone for your attention during this presentation. If you have any general questions about this presentation or the information included, you may contact Val Bailoni at the UB IRB phone number 716-888-4888 or ub-irb@buffalo.edu by email. You may also contact the CTSI Clinical Research Facilitators, Marchelle Brooks or Alexis O'Brien, through the phone number 716-829-4357 or ctsi help@buffalo.edu by email.